All right, welcome back to the CTMP 60 podcast, everyone. Thank you so much for all the likes, feedback, and stories that have lit up our comment section. Everyone has their own stories and favorite memories about CTMP, and that's what this show is all about. Our guest today is quite simply one of the greatest motorsport photographers of all time. He is also an author, a painter, a keynote speaker, among other things. He is the legendary Allan de Plante, the author, of course, of Villeneuve, a racing legend, a book that I poured over as a kid after I'd hear stories about the legendary Gilles Villeneuve from my dad. Gilles was, of course, my dad's hero and a hero to so many who saw him race. To Allan, Gilles was a close friend, and his experiences at Motorsport and his journey through the Formula One world with Gilles are truly incredible to listen to. I got to meet Allan for the first time in 2013 when I stumbled into our friend Gary Grant's motorhome on the eve of the first NASCAR truck weekend at CTMP. I was nervous and awestruck by Allan's stories, and it was a night I will never forget. He's an incredibly important figure in our sport, and getting Allan de Plante on this podcast is such an honor for us. So here he is, without further ado, Allan de Plante.
Anytime.
Okay, Allan de Plante, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome.
Yeah, we wanted to. You were one of the first names we wrote down. We scratched down when we started adding names for this that we wanted to interview and get their stories about their experiences in racing and specifically at the circuit then known as Motorsport in the 60s and 70s and all the way through the years until what it is now as CTMP. And maybe you just want to start off by talking about how you first got involved or interested, let's say, in cars and motor racing as a young man.
Well, I think as every young man does, most of us anyways, they fall in love with the car, whether it's sitting on the old man's knee and saying, faster, faster, Dad. Or, when I was 15, I bought my first car, which was a 1928 Model A three-window coupe, except it wasn't quite exactly right. It had a 357, not a 357, had a Chrysler Firepower sitting in it, wow, which was a V8 of substantial power. And I bought it for $35, and I traded it for a 1948 Mercury three-window coupe, split window coupe, and that was an interesting car. So, but I mean, my father at the same time, which would probably be somewhere in the 1969, not 69, would be mid early 60s. Was going through midlife crisis. And what does he do? He goes out and he buys a beautiful red MGB with a black hardtop, a removable hardtop. And of course, it was his whole deal to get involved in this. And of course, I borrowed it even to go and buy him cigarettes, which I could not stand even at that stage of my life. But I would do anything to drive this car. And I really had a lot of fun, met a lot of really neat guys. And then I got asked to leave school because I was doing something I shouldn't be doing, which actually I enjoyed doing it anyways, but the hell with that. And so in grade 11, they gave me the opportunity to find gainful employment. And my father at the time was the news director for the television station. Now, my father is an investigative reporter for the Globe and the Telly before that. Wow. And quite a renowned character of award qualities. He actually was working for either the Globe or the Telly when a young cub reporter got on the team by the name of what the hell's that old bugger he had before? Oh yeah, Norris. What's his name? Anyways, Norris worked, and told me all about working with my dad. Of course, I'm sure that my dad was a pretty difficult guy to work with because he was a pretty difficult guy to live with. But one thing that was kind of neat, I got a job as a photographer, which I had never ever done this before, at the television station, because they were desperate. They must have been desperate. And I got under the tutelage of a guy by the name of Bill Shorsey, who was really quite remarkable in his patience to try and answer some of the questions that were coming out of this mouth of mine. But my dad realized that I needed a car. So we had a date and we went down to Toronto and we scoured Danforth Avenue and couldn't find anything. And one of the salesmen says, you got to go down to Clarkson. There's a place that specializes in sports cars down there. We drove on the lot, and the first thing we saw on the right-hand side as we drove in on the lot was an absolutely, and still to this day, the most beautiful car in the world, a white Austin Healey 3000. Wow. And my father just looked at that, and I looked at it, and he said, "Oh, that's going to be too expensive." And then out of the showroom comes this little guy, sort of strutting, right, as he still does. The last time I saw him, he was still strutting. It was Bill Brack, and Brack sold us the car, and he took it out, and I had to sit in the back seat. And then and he drove it, and he drove it, but not hard. And then he said, "Do you want to drive the car?" Well, by then I was salivating. I couldn't handle it. So Bill got in the back, and I got in the front. And he said, "Don't take it over 3,000 revs." I might have even been 2,000. But my father and I were both in love with it. We got in the car after paying for it and drove it to North Bay, and proceeded to have both rocker panels fall off on the way up. But they were, I think they were put on with, paper mache or something like this. But the Healey gave me a whole new group of friends. There were a bunch of guys that all had either a GT4, not GT40s, wouldn't they all have loved that? A GT6, a number of MGBs, couple of Healeys, and a number of other cars, and we all hung around together. We did stuff that probably was, I know it was totally illegal what we were doing. We were racing on the streets. We were just doing what 16 or 17-year-old kids that have got access to machines like this. But there was one guy who was into racing and had been into racing from the time that he could build one of these carts that goes down the hill. What do you have?
Soapbox.
What do you call it? A soapbox derby cart. And he had that. He did that. And then he got a go-kart. And then he ended up with a Healey, and he ended up with a Mini. But he ended up at Motorsport, actually racing, in the all the under series. And he did reasonably well. But the problem with him is he was 6'3", so shoehorning him into the Healey that he drove, which I think was actually Grant Clark's ex Sebring car, the car he still has. Anyways, and this Mini, and he drove it all over Hell's Half Acre. But my buddies and I all wanted to go and see him race. But I couldn't one weekend go because I had to work, but they all went to Motorsport. And of course, I heard all about the weekend. The next weekend was at Harewood. Well, I didn't miss Harewood. And I went down to Harewood, and I was so excited about what I saw that after going home all the way back to North Bay, which is 250 miles north of Toronto, I went to Watkins Glen. That was the next race I got. So it was really a start for my introduction to motor racing itself. I mean, the first time I went to Motorsport, actually, I went with a bunch of friends from the Willowdale area, and one of the guys had a Buick. I think it was a Skylark, but it was a station wagon.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Yeah.
And it was bright yellow, and we called it the Yellow Submarine. Well, it got up there, and of course, I was not much of a drinker, still don't drink at all, but at the time, I got oiled up enough that I don't really remember anything about the 1967 Canadian Grand Prix. I was horizontal in the back end of this bull car during the rain. I was the only one that was probably wet, but I was half awake and half asleep. And we were on the top of 2A, just sitting on the hill, on the edge of the hill. But I was really suddenly turned on. The next year, I'd already planned. I knew where I was going to go. I wanted to go back to Motorsport. I wanted to go to Watkins Glen for the Can-Am and any Formula One race that I could get, any race that I could get to, no matter what it was. And my son, JP, who you guys know, was born on, well, I got to look at it, April 16th. It's April the 20th. So in 3 days, he's going to have his birthday. Anyways, he was born on that day. And on the Can-Am of that year, which would have been June, he spent the weekend sleeping and living in a tent on the outside of 2A, up on top of the hill, you know, where the bikes go up the hill. And it was great. I don't think his mother enjoyed it because I think it partially rained during the course of the weekend, plus the fact that the sound of the Can-Am cars kept her awake in the daytime, and JP was just always just excited by the noise. All right, so that basically where I got my introduction to Motorsport itself. The next season, that same season, I went down. That was '68. I went down to Watkins Glen, and while I was at the Glen, I saw a concessionaire that had a brass dash plaque, which was for the race that they had of that year. And I sent you a copy of the one that we did. But I went home and I'm basically, I think about, I'm an entrepreneur. No matter what I do, I think, all right, so how am I going to make any money here? And I went in there to, I drew a picture of this dash plaque, which I saw in my mind. And I went to Avenue Road where Harvey had the office
yeah,
for Motorsport. And I got to speak to Harvey. And I mean, he was very gracious. He welcomed me no matter, I think he would welcome anybody because he always had his eye open. He always was watching to see how he could make his sport better, how he could make the track better, and how he could make some money.
yeah.
So I showed him the drawing, told him what I wanted to do. And he said, yeah, okay, let's go ahead. I'll let you do this. And he said, and I'll give you these 8x10s if you want to blow them up to make them into advertising or do posters with them. You're welcome to do that. So I went back and I had 5,000 of these damn dash flags made. the weight of the thing on its own, it came in about a foot square box that almost took two men and a small boy to carry because it was so heavy, because they were solid brass. And they're beautiful. They really are. And I took the 4 of the 8x10s and I had them blown up, 2 of them 4 by 8 feet, and the other 4 I had made into posters, 24 by 36, roughly that size, which I sold at $5 a piece. And they went out the door like it was like on the Saturday morning. There were no posters left, and where I put my concession stand was between 1 and 2, the double tunnels down there. If you came through those tunnels, you would walk straight into the booth that I set up, where the road actually goes into a fork.
Yeah.
And it was great. I had people coming around all day Saturday and all day Sunday wondering whether or not, we had any more posters. I sold the 2 great big prints as well for a considerable amount of money. And I sold about 50 dash plaques out of 5,000. So somewhere around here, there's 4,500 worth of lead weight hanging around. So when I went back to Harvey, I realized, that the dash blacks were not going to work. He said, I don't want any money for it. He says, anything that you made, invest it back into the idea. He said, you should consider, I'll give you the rights to sell posters here if you want. So I got involved with a couple of guys, but one in particular was Paul Oxman out in California. And I got some beautiful posters out of him and got the rights to sell posters at Saint-Jovite and Watkins Glen. and they wouldn't give me the rights down in Mid-Ohio, but that didn't make any difference. I just wanted to go and be part of the scene, right? And I did quite well with that. And when I went back, I had been taking some pictures myself with a side Pentax with a 200 millimeter lens, and I'm looking at the finished, pictures, and I'm thinking, I can shoot pictures as good as these posters are. Whether maybe I should do them myself. So, anyways, I thought about getting involved in that, but I had no access to get to the tracks to actually shoot pictures. I had actually gone there at Motorsport when there was nobody around, and jumped the fence and walked around the track and saw the different angles that I was thinking about. And would it be good here? Can I make the thing? I didn't know anything about panning. I didn't know about anything as far as the camera was concerned when it dealt with something that moved at great speed. So I am one day I thought I got to solve this problem with access. So I'm standing near the tower outside the back where the false grid is. And there was a guy there that was kind of cocky, had a hat sitting on rakishly, and well, it turned out it was F. David Stone and his wife Janice, who I love them both. They're great. David, unfortunately, is not doing so well right now, and Janice will always be Janice. But I went up and I started the conversation with him, and he was talking to a number of people. I just sort of hung around. And then what I was doing, actually, I wasn't really interested in talking to him at all. I was interested in looking at his credentials. And what he had on, he had on, I believe it was a 99. And I never bothered to look at the others, and I should have. But I went back to the car, brought some crepe paper out with some pens, and I drew the 99, and I bought an Oscar Kowaleski plastic credential holder, and put this fake credential in it. And it turned out that I had God's pass, the 99, which would allow me to sit in the car while it was moving with speed. But for a year and a half, I used this, and if every race I would go and find out what color it was, because it very seldom ever changed color. But I would make another one and go up to the track. And one day while I was there, a friend of mine who I worked with I was working at that point at the Ontario Crippled Children's Centre in Toronto on Rumsey Road as a recreational therapist. And a friend of mine that was there two of them were actually. One was a guy by the name of Paul Bryan, who became quite an institution at Motorsport as a marshal. His father was a marshal there, his wife was a marshal there, and his son Bill is legendary in his own right. He's moved from Motorsport marshalling to somewhere in NASCAR as a statistician, because he's like a savant. You can ask him any question about any car during that period. And this is a 5-year-old kid. They would ask him a question and he'd be able to tell you who drove the car, what the serial number was on the car, how it did, and if it was retired, and where it was at the present time. This is a 5-year-old. This is a brilliant child. But anyways, Paul and I, and this other guy by the name of Ralph Bishop, who now lives in the Orient, we go down to his car. He opens up the trunk, and in the trunk is a chrome case. Well, he opens up the case, and then he says, "What do you think?" And here, sitting in front of me, is a Hasselblad with 3 lenses. That's a Hasselblad 500 CM, which is, I mean, it's like, so you drive a Corvette. I mean, this was like a Veyron. This was like the ultimate automobile you could ever get behind it. And that's what this car was. And I looked at it, and he said, pick it up, go ahead. So I picked it up, and he changed the lenses to longer, and I looked through the prism, and I cranked it on. He showed me how to crank it on, and then I fired the shutter once. And it as opposed to what a normal camera sounds like, there's no motor drive, no light meters, nothing that's automatic. But the sound of the shutter was this ka-thunk. And of course, immediately I'm aroused. I'm not just aroused. I love the sound and the feel of this thing. And he looked at me, says, use it as long as you want until you can afford one of your own. And of course, I did that. And 2 years later, I had a project that gave me this. It didn't give me just one of them. It gave me two of them. So this is, and this is probably, I don't know, you're probably looking at 25, 30,000 bucks for that.
Wow.
It's huge money. It's a huge camera.
Be careful with that.
Yeah, right.
I'm like,
huge weight. Actually, surprisingly enough, a house that I had on Bowen Island burnt to the ground, and that survived. And I don't know. It was quite remarkable, actually. So I got, so I now got involved with this Hasselblad, but I had Harvey walk up to me in the pits one day, and he said, "Do me a favor." And I said, "Yeah, what's up?" I mean, I didn't know what. I didn't try to hide anything. I didn't try to hide the credentials. He said, "Send me a letter asking me for credentials for the season or for the year or for the rest of your life. I don't care. Send me a letter and I'll get you proper credentials." And I just I obviously got red in the face. He says, "I've known about this for a year and a half." but I like you as a person. I like what you do. And I certainly like the work that you're doing. And I want you around here. So one day when he caught me without the camera on the pit straight, he said, "Where's the camera?" And I said, "Well, it's in the car, I see." He said, "Get the camera or there's the gate." His interest was he basically mentored me in many things that I did that just forced me to go ahead and really take a hold of this budding career that was suddenly coming to my lap.
Harvey, that's the kind of gentleman he was. He did it for me when it came to driving, and it's not surprising. He was just a big-hearted guy, and he loved to see people succeed.
Well, he loved also people that if you had some talent and he thought maybe he could help you, he would do his best. And he had quite a wry sense of humor. And I'm sure that you probably saw it on a number of occasions. And sorry, Sam, we didn't mean to cut you off, but you're the younger wingman here, so that's all right.
Well, no, what I was gonna say is I don't think if I ever when did Harvey pass away, in 1990? 96 maybe.
Something in that neighborhood.
Yeah, something around there. Yeah.
Well, if I ever met him, then it was as like a little child, and I don't remember. But I did go to school in the same program, in the same classes as his grandson, Sammy.
Yeah.
And we didn't figure it out for some time because everyone was mispronouncing his last name and calling him Hughes. And Hughes didn't mean really anything to me, but Hughes I recognized. So finally he spoke up, I guess, at one point and said, no, it's pronounced Hughes. And I went, hey, like Harvey Hughes? And we were both like, had this moment, and then we had a good time. We kind of talked about it. So that was really cool. So random. It was like two family connections to motorsport just at this program in Ottawa. So it was kind of cool. But
it's amazing. It's amazing how small the world really is. Indeed. When I was living in Toronto, I moved from the recreation center to working selling cars for Ashley Motors. And in the recreation thing, I was making $8,750 a year with a young family. But I ended up working for Hans Pfaff after that. But while I was at Pfaff, I was watching the television on a Sunday night, and I wanted to find out who won at Monte Carlo. And this guy comes on the TV and he says, "If you've got a dream, see the Bank of Montreal." Well, of course, it was Leslie Nielsen from the airport. He's the actor, and he was pushing the Bank of Montreal. Well, I had this dream, And I ended up the next morning, I got in touch with George Blackburn from the Bank of Montreal. And I said, I've got something that, because they had already become the Olympic Games official bank. And I thought, well, I got to get involved with these guys somehow. And I had been doing these multiple images on single portraits. And I'll get back to that in a second. But I went to down to that, right, to them, because he said, I can't see you for another week. Now we're in the middle of dealing with the Olympic Games, and we're talking about the coins, and we're talking about this. And I thought, right in my mind, I'm saying, God, what I have is exactly what you want. So the next morning I went down, sat in the vestibule to his office, and I had his secretary. I said, don't introduce me, just nod when he walks in the door. And when he walked in the door, I said, Mr. Blackburn, I'm Allan de la Plante. He said, I told you yesterday, I can't see you. I said, well, maybe this will change your mind. And I pulled out a portrait of Jackie Stewart. He took one look at it. He goes, don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. And he came back with another guy. And I said, I can, show you what I have. And I took the two of them into his office. Well, he took me into his office, and I had the two of them stand with their faces looking out the window while I set up my 4 or 5 examples against the back wall and in chairs and wherever. And
I guess this was before a PowerPoint presentation.
There weren't any problems. I had the two of them turn around, and both of them, one of them goes, Jesus, this stuff is great. I'll tell you what, I'm going to make an appointment for you. And he said, I'll give you an appointment get an appointment for you next Thursday morning, which this was Tuesday. So in 2 days, he said, I need you in Montreal at the bank building. I'll give you the addresses and everything else at 10 o'clock in the morning. So here I'm scrambling, because here I'm working for Hans Pfaff. So I went back to Hansi and I said, look, I think I've got a customer. I'm going to need a car to take it to them to see if I can hustle it. Well, I took a 914 2-liter, white, beautiful, with black roof on it, go like a scared cat. And I put my portfolio in there, and I went to Ottawa. And I had already been to Ottawa about 6 months ago, and they had said, well, we're going to find you a sponsor for this idea of yours. And I phoned Carol Erb and Dan Pugliese from the National Sport and Recreation Center as soon as I got home from the bank in Toronto. And I said, I need some window dressing Thursday morning in Montreal. I really need it if we want to get a sponsor for this. One, she could hardly remember the meeting that we'd had last fall. But anyways, I'm in the vestibule in the bank, 9:45, and in comes Dan Pugliese, the head of the National Sport and Recreation Center, Carol Erb, his underling, and Ron Stewart, the football player who became the lawyer for the National Sport and Recreation Center. And up the elevator we go, and Dan said, what do you want us to say? And I said, nothing. I don't want you to say anything. You're strictly window dressing. If they ask you a question, you just answer. But let me pitch them and see what happens. So the same thing. And now there were about 4 or 5 guys in this boardroom, and I made them all look out the window again. And I put them all up nicely. And then I had them to turn around, and Blackburn turned around. He says, see what I told you? This stuff is beautiful. We want this stuff. So I'm just standing there, and I'm sort of excited, and I'm not saying anything. I'm doing my best to I learned from the car business. You want to sell something, shut your mouth. Let the damn thing sell itself. So he said, okay, I like this. How many do you want to do? I said, I didn't have any idea. I said 60. He said 60. Okay, that sounds like a good number, because we can have good shows with it. And I said, there's a couple of other things that I will need. I'll need a set of Hasselblads, and I want a motorhome in your colors that I can go back and forth across the country, promote the project, let everybody know what it is we're doing. And he said, I like it. I think it's a great idea. How much? I had no idea how much. I mean, I had no idea what it would be worth. Is it worth $50 a print? Is it worth $500 a print? And off the top of my head, I said $176,000. And all I could hear was Carol Erb behind me hyperventilating. She must have been having a fit, wondering what this idiot in front of her is talking
Pitching.
so irreverently. And Blackburn says, that's a good deal for us. I think that's a good deal. He said, put it all together. So as we're going out, we're getting to the elevator, shook hands and all the rest of the bull. We go to the elevator. They never asked the people from the National Sport and Center Recreation, even one other than maybe, are you in agreement to set this whole thing up? I said, yeah, okay. They did. But we got to the elevator. I said, whatever you do, don't suddenly yell as much as I want to yell, because this is the last thing you want to do when you're going out and wanting whoever gave you the deal think that you got them by the shorts. But back to the portrait, that double image thing, which is on the back of my Villeneuve book. Guy,
which I have here.
That's the one. That's the one. You can see the headshot and the action shot in the bottom.
Yep.
Had a guy we all know and love, Paul Cook. He said to me at a Can-Am race, he said, would you do me a favor? Sure. By then I had already had some recognition just selling little prints, right? And I didn't want to sell little prints. I wanted something that's substantial. And he said, I want you to do a portrait of my driver, which was Roger McKeag, God bless his soul. He said that because I want to give it to him for Christmas. And I said, all right, I'll do that. When I went home, all the way home, I'm driving home and my brain is clicking on this word portrait. How am I going to, I can take a picture of his eyes and you can see his eyes, but you don't know that he isn't driving a snowmobile or a power boat or what, or I can do the car and then you can't see him. So in my mind, in a dream, I saw the picture of Roger's eyes, which were bright blue, and the car below it in motion. So I went to my printer and I said, look, this is what I want to do. And my printer says, no, that we can't do that. I said, just try. This is what I think you should do. Dodge this, dodge that. And what happened when we both stood there as the damn 16 by 20 came out of the printer? The first one, and there were only, I think, 2 made all told. The first one came out and you could see the car. And then all of a sudden it blended up beautifully into a sort of it was a greenish colored windscreen, and then up into the blue eyes of Roger McKeag. And I looked at Goldie Lang, who was my printer at the time. I said, have you ever seen anything so beautiful? He said, I have never seen anything so beautiful. So I took it and I showed Paul, and Paul said, would you frame it? And I said, yeah, for sure. So I took it to Paul, and he said, frame it, how much? And I said, I don't know for sure. Well, it cost me $32 to frame it, and I charged him $50. So I figured, good, I skinned him for another $13 or $14. But I brought it down and I showed it to him, and I brought it to him in Ohio. And he said, this is absolutely stunning. He said, come on to the motorhome. I'll pay you right now. He said, and I'll give you a couple of words of advice. So I gave it to him, and he said, if you had asked me for $500 for this thing, I'd have given it to you in a second. I've never seen anything so beautiful. I've never seen anything so beautiful in my life. He said, I want you to take it and walk down the grid. Don't show Roger. Whatever you do, don't show Roger, but show every other driver that you can get your hands on and see whether or not what the reaction is. He said, and the third piece of advice is never, ever, ever undersell yourself. Always expect that people will know that either you're very, very good and expensive or you're both. But from that walk down the grid, I got 9 or 10 new orders, including from Jackie Stewart. So, wow. But I was not after the drivers. I was basically after the commercial end of things. I wanted the owners and the sponsors, and that's what I ended up getting, which in one way was sort of self-defeating as a so-called press photographer, because all the credentials were basically designed for press people, not for commercial guys like me.
Right.
So I had met Hans Goulde and Dale von Trebra and a whole pile of people. Spanky Smith, who was the guy that brought the first motorhome to Motorsport,
Wow.
parked in the back. And the best part about that was all the drivers used that motorhome as a refuge. You'd go in there and you'd be sitting there with Denny Holm and Bruce McLaren and David Phipps and Michael Turner. And I had a chance to buy an original sketch of Graham Hill from Michael Turner for about $100. I didn't have the money and I wanted that damn thing. I collect art. So, I mean, I was really had a hunker. And over the bathroom, I mean, this place was festooned with all kinds of stickers from Motorsport, from Watkins Glen, from Road America. And over the bathroom is a sign that says, some of the fastest ass on the face of the planet have passed through this door, which is where the bathroom was. And of course, there were a lot of really interesting characters involved in my end of the business, as there were in your end of the business. Jesus, I can tell you. Do you ever remember a guy named Gordon Dewar?
Gordon Dewar, yes.
Yeah. Crazy as a house rat. I could say that now because he won't come and punch me in the head. But I used to hang around J&O, which had his Formula Ford car and his Can-Am car and a few other things. But some of the stuff that he did was just enough to blow your mind off. And I mean, I one day at Mid-Ohio, and I mean, not too many guys of my ilk get a chance to get in the car at speed, not behind the wheel, in the passenger seat. And in Mid-Ohio, he had some problems in qualifying, had some problems with the vehicle itself and just setup. And apparently we found out later that one of the front corners was about ready to fall off. but they found out what it was, fixed it. And then he went to the steward and he said, I've got a guy from the media here that wants to go around and take some movies and pictures in the car at speed. And guys, David Donald, I think was his name. I forget. Anyways, the steward and the press guy said, yeah, sure, take him out. He basically was not interested in letting me. He only wanted to see what the car was tuned.
Yes.
So I'm in this. It's in a March 707, which is the one that has the little front wings on the front of it. And I'm sitting in the passenger seat, not strapped in. There's nothing to tie me in there.
Yeah.
Or maybe there was. No, there wasn't at that particular one. So anyways, he gets out there and all of a sudden I'm thinking, holy shit, he's not going slow. He's going flat out. And I'm not kidding you. He was going flat. When you come down the back straight at Mid-Ohio and then you go take the right and go up over the hill and down over the leap, I'll tell you, I lifted my ass right off the seat. And I mean, I had 12 frames to shoot. I shot the 12 frames and I was once I realized mentally where the hell I was, I thought, I got to do something about this. I cranked the roll of film back so that I could reshoot. And then I started shooting blind. There was no film being used in the camera, just to get my brain thinking that that's what I was doing, as opposed to realizing that the 3 or 4 laps that we went around that place was absolutely, Christ almighty. You guys are, you ought to be locked up and examined. You guys are crazy. Fast. But other than that, it was pretty straightforward.
I'm gonna go back a half step here. It's the Atlantic Series in the mid '70s when KK was there. Danny Sullivan, Howdy Holmes, Bobby Ray Hall, and of course Gilles. So let's talk about this. How did you meet Gilles? Well,
a number of ways, but all during that series, I spent a lot of time with them because I had a lot of work to do with SDP through Sid Priddle, and quite a few other people. But my way to get to the owners and sponsors was to do a portrait of the driver that made it very clear that you could see, in Gilles' case, ski rule right across the front. Yeah. I was after the sponsor. So I produced 2 of them of Gilles. And as he came out of the back end of the garages at Motorsport, I intercepted him. I said, "Listen," and by then he knew that I took pictures. He didn't know anything else. I said, "I've got some interesting pictures of you that I'd love to show you when you get a chance." So, my motorhome is right down in the back paddock, and it's got Bank of Montreal all over the side of it. just come down and I'll show you what I've got. So about 10 o'clock that night, there's a knock on the door. I'm ready to hit the rack. I'm tired. I've been out in the track all bloody day. And I open up the door, and there's Joanne and Gilles. And I invited them in. So they came in, and there was a little bit of small talk. He was not a great guy for small talk. Whenever we were together, if I was in one of my terrifying rides with him, wherever we were going in a car, never talk about racing, never talk about anything of any real substance. But he took a look at the two, and he said, I want one of these. I said, "Well, choose which one you want." And he said, "How much?" I said, $290, unframed as it was. And I said, "But I know damn well you haven't got a nickel to your name." I said, "Sign one of these and I'll keep it for my own collection, and you can take the other one and do with whatever you want." Well, it ended up eventually in his dad's hands. He gave it to his dad. And from that point on, and I said, "I'll tell you what, I'm interested in a little deal for this, because you've skinned me right here and there." I said, when you get to Formula One, I want to come with you." He said, "Done deal." So when he actually, in 1977, he went to Formula One, I was already involved. I couldn't get to Silverstone to see the time that he was in the McLaren. And Of course, I found out through Gaston, through a quiet phone call, that said, "No, that wasn't the time that Gaston called me." But anyways, Gaston, when they were going to Italy to sign for Ferrari, Gaston said, "You need to get yourself a photographer so that you can record what's going to happen to you from all the time that you're going to be in Formula One." Wow. So, and Gilles just said, "I've already got somebody in mind." And it was me. Bullshit luck. I happened to be there with, in the right credentials and not afraid to be part of the team.
Wow.
Yeah. Bullshit luck.
So his first race was with Ferrari was at Motorsport, though, right?
It was. Yes, I mean, he did quite a bit of testing at Maranello, at Furiano, but his first time he sat in the car was actually on the Thursday at Motorsport. I was there on a Thursday, and then I don't recall whether or not they did anything other than make sure that the seat fitting was correct, and because it was all going to be fast, because Nicky had already announced that day that he was leaving Ferrari. When he found out that Gilles was going to be there, the writing was on the wall, and he didn't think that Reutemann was going, and he wasn't sure. But anyways, he just decided, "Screw this, I'm out of here," and which he did. He did the same thing with Brabham. So on the Friday, the first time that Gilles got in the car and was strapped in, and the car was going to be lit up, I was in the front of it and down low, and I got a picture which you've already seen that has the first time that he's in the car on a Formula One grid in a Ferrari. I mean, what more could any man, racer or not racer, dream about?
That's it.
And I look at him, and if you look at the picture, you'll see it's like he's going to 7-Eleven. Like, he's so relaxed. He's got everything is in order. There's no fear or anticipation of what could be going to happen. And I got lucky. I got the shot, and that was it.
Wow.
So how many did you go to the majority of the F1 races?
I wouldn't of his, he did 67. I wouldn't think that I did definitely did the majority, because the only thing that they paid for was my expenses. They got me a hotel room, which was never a hotel room. It was usually a hole in the wall. And in many cases, it wasn't a hole in the wall. I had to go scouring and hustling to find myself a place to sleep. But in most cases, the only thing that they gave me was the airfare and the means to come around. If I needed a ride to go somewhere, I had some means to get around, either with the team or with somebody else. And I guess I relied more on my compadres in the press corps, which at that time, of course, I wanted to be I didn't want to be a member of the press. The guys in the press at that day, you'd sell a cover for $50. I mean, I'm not risking my life for a $50 picture. What I was actually after was one of these. And that's the American Racing Press Association red armband. There's also an ERPA version of this, and there were probably in the world maybe 40 qualified to actually wear one of these things. And in Canada, I had more guys that, were against me coming because they knew I was a commercial guy. They knew I wasn't going to, sell stuff to the press. Or if I was going to charge them so much money they didn't know what the hell to do, which basically it did the press guys some good because it brought their value up. And so I ended up finally getting in because I think Hans Gulde and Dale von Trieber went for, backed me up and said, this guy we need, or we don't need him, but we would like to have him in the fold. So I got my red armband, and that red armband, the first season I had it without any, I got a call on a Saturday night. We want you at Indy tomorrow morning. There's a flight leaving Toronto at X in the morning. We're flying back that same night. We need you to go down there and take some pictures for us. I think it was Canadian Track and Traffic. And I said, well, I don't have any credentials. And I said, but let me see what I can do. That armband opened up the door. They let me in. I've been to Monaco with that armband. I've been to Le Mans with that armband. And it's always been treated with the greatest of respect.
Wow.
But the number of Grand Prix, I had so much, by this time I had so much other work to do on this side that if I got to one every month or one every 2 months, it was, or if it was in North America, I'd grab the two of them and do the one in the West as well. And Las Vegas and Detroit. But basically it's, I had to look after my own food as well. But if they ever had any requirements for commercial work, Gaston would always point to me and send the business my way. And that was half the battle.
Where did you get the, so we've got that iconic from the bridge shot from 1974.
Yep.
Where did you get that idea from?
Oh, it's pretty simple. I mean, you want to get up as high as you can, or you get at an angle that nobody else has got.
Or did you use a ladder?
Oh, sure.
I know you did.
I went to Harvey and I said, Harvey, I want to take a picture off the bridge. He said, do you need somebody to help you get up there? And I said, no, I need a ladder. I don't want somebody hanging on to me. I don't want to hang off it. I want to, be able to stand up and shoot into it.
Fantastic shot.
And it's interesting because it's still iconic the way that shot is.
Yeah.
And we redid it at the truck race a couple of years ago.
Yes. Yep.
I had an assistant, this guy in the corner.
Yeah, that one of the highlights of my career as a press room
junkie
assistant or whatever the heck that job was called.
Oh, it's called gopher.
Gopher, yeah, pretty much.
I just read
Also, the
you see her running to the bridge carrying a ladder.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Alan basically told me to be as quiet as you can about it. Well, I'm carrying this ladder around. Like,
Well, the trouble is that once the rest of the guys in the press see that something strange is going on,
exactly.
they want in it. They
Yeah.
want to get in. And I don't know how many people have shot off the bridge since. I have no idea. But it's
Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen anyone do that.
No, I haven't either.
they have a tendency to be. Everybody wants to do something different. I say that. Yes, they do, and yes, they don't. I see a number of regulars there that can't seem to get their ass away from turn two, and because it's a classic picture.
Yeah.
And then the new gang that are there now, they're not so new anymore. They're old. Johnny Walker's old. Ivan Novotny's old. Gary Grant. Well, Gary Grant was already old. When Gilles was killed, I stopped shooting racing cars, and then I got a call to go and do a portrait for a guy in an Indy car, and this is like 2010, and I said no, I haven't shot racing cars, for 18 years. And I said, I don't know that I still have it. He said, oh yeah, you'll still have it. I want you there. And I said, all right. So by then Facebook was in full bore. Gary Grant and I and Ivan and Johnny Walker were all, friends. I'd never met them. I didn't know them. We all just had conversations here, there, and everywhere. So first thing I know is Grant is offering me his basement suite, and John Walker came all the way to the airport from West Hill to pick me up. I'd never met the guy. I didn't know who the hell he was from Adam, and they treated me with warmth and it was great. It's great. They're great. And they're great shooters. And of course, Gary's a great cook. He's a hell of a cook, actually.
Yes.
But
He is.
yes, and Ivan and I have have a great connection as well, because Ivan has now done several stamps, which to get a stamp is a great honor to have them. I had I was lucky when I did the Villeneuve book. I had done a CD-ROM with it, the last one, and I had just finished a Fire book, but then I did the CD-ROM with the second Villeneuve book, and this guy that owned a computer store said, "Would you come and play the CD-ROM in my booth just to attract attention?" Well, of course, it attracted all kinds of attention, except a guy that by the name of Richard McCorkle came up to me and he said, "Where have you been?" I said, "Why? Are you Revenue Canada?" And he said, "No, I'm Canada Post." I said, "Oh, that's great. What's up?" He said, "We're doing 4 stamps on Gilles to commemorate his life." And he said, I would like you to come into the office and have a look at what we're doing. I went in there. They had 4 stamps and they had all my pictures on them. And I said, "Holy shit." I said, "You can't do these without permission." And he said, "Well, no, we're not worried about that part of it. We're not that far ahead. We've definitely had to get you involved." I said, "Okay, so let's sit down with the designers and I'll tell you what I think." And what I wanted was my signature on one of those stamps, which was the helmet and the action, right? And if you look at the 90-cent stamp, it's got that shot. The 45 is coming out of Lowe's.
Wow.
Directly at you. And I said, "I like this." I said, "This car he loved, this car killed him, this car he loved, and I need to have this headshot used." And of course, I was able to get my way, and they were good, and
Wow.
40 million of each were sold. So I could off camera, I will tell you what the real story is. But when at that time I was living in a nice house in Aylmer in Quebec, and we went to Bowen Island and bought a house which I called the house that Gilles built. It was absolutely stunning. Overlooked the ocean, and anyways, unfortunately, 5 years later, almost to the day, it burned to the ground, and almost all of my negatives and transparencies went out the window. It was a terrible time. Yeah.
And what year was that?
2000. Bad year. Started off with my mother dying in January. JP was diagnosed with cancer 4 days after that. The house burnt to the ground on the 19th of April, and then on the 19th of July or August, 3 months to the day of the house burning down, I had been fighting with the insurance company, as they always make things difficult for regular human beings. I had a heart attack on the tennis court, and I ended up on my back for about 5 or 6 months. And the next day after I had that, and I was in Lionsgate Hospital in North Vancouver, they settled the whole deal. I guess in hindsight, I should have sued their asses off, but when you're not. And then, of course, a month later, my wife announced that she had found a younger model and was moving on. So it was not the best of years.
Not a great way to start the millennium, that's for sure.
Yeah.
The new millennium.
It wasn't.
No.
So,
Can I ask you about 76 and the 4x4 photo, because that's one that we have in our boardroom at CTMP.
Unbelievable
on the wall
shot
that we always look at and
explain the photo. I wish we had a.
I'll flash it up on the screen. I'll flash it up on the screen here.
And funny enough, I get orders for it all the time. I've just had 2 this morning. People that want prints of it, and it's interesting if you go on Facebook and you look at any of the old pictures from that era, 76 or so, especially when taken from the top of 5, looking down towards the bridge, looking down the chute, the backwards, you'll see how wide the track is. Now, the track is probably 23 or 24 feet wide at that point. And on the outside of it is probably no more than 3 or 4 feet of gravel before the guardrail. So the guys are hauling their ass down there at 170 miles an hour. There is no runoff. There is no protection. There's an earth berm behind the guardrail. But it's not a position that I want to be in normally at any time of my life. Because if one of you loses it, the first guy that's going to know about it is you. The second guy is going to be me. I had long before when I first started getting involved in motor racing, I had long before realized that the best friend that you can have is a marshal, whether you're in trouble or whether you're not. Because one, if you can gain their confidence and they will know that you're not going to be an ass. They'll do a lot to help you get into positions that you normally shouldn't be in. And I went there. I knew that the shot that I want. I realized in an undercard that I could actually see underneath the car. I could see the air and the sky under the car. So if I was low enough, but I had to get a long way down the hill and then look back up in it. And where am I? I'm near the end of the guard. Well, I'm not near the end of the guardrail, keeps going there. But I'm in a position where highly dangerous. If somebody comes off there and they take that guardrail out, they're taking that piece of guardrail all the way to Bowmanville with your head with it. So, I mean, it's that dangerous. It's that risky. Yep. It's different now because I think it's 35 feet between the pavement, which is much wider, to the outside where the guardrail is. It's got quite a piece of runoff there. And they've had guys egg it in there a number of times that could cause you all kinds of problems.
Been there, done it.
I've been there, done it. I went to the marshal at the top of the hill where the marshal stand is. And I said, look, I would like to go down a little bit further than what's acceptable for the start and one lap, and that's it. So he said, all right, be prepared to drop flat on your belly if something starts to go wrong. And, I can't guarantee you're going to be safe, because you're not going to be safe. You're not going to be safe at all. And he let me go down, and I went down, and there were a couple of other guys that wanted to follow me, and he just started blowing the whistle and pointing at them and get your ass out of here. And I went down, I took that shot. I rewound. I only have 12 frames in a roll of film, no motor drive, no high-speed motor drive, no nothing. And that was shot at a 500th of a second at f5.6, wide open. So the depth of field is all of about the length of the nose of the car back to Ronnie Peterson's head. And I got the one shot, and a few others after rolled the film back a little bit, went on. And then rather than go uphill, I went downhill and went down into the ditch, because I had at that time, and I could never do it now, but at that time, and there now, of course, it's probably full of silt down in there, but there was a pipe probably about that size in diameter. And I duck walked through underneath the track to the outside, and to the outside of the track at that point. You can't do it now, I'm sure. You couldn't get through that pipe. I mean, I might be, but it wouldn't be, I'd be pretty fluid if I did. But when I got home, I thought, oh, this is a nice picture, never thinking that it might be iconic and eventually become iconic. But in 1984, the National Archives got to me, and the first picture they chose was that one. Wow. And they chose about 5 or 6 other ones that went on to become part of a permanent collection at the National Archives. It became normally they have a 1-month show of various photographers or artists in the front of the archives. That one went for 4 months, and it stretched right into the official tour of the Pope, which I did the official book on the Pope in 1984. So I spent 12 days as close as, me and that wall to John Paul II.
Wow. So
it all started. It all started, in that era where I had no interest in becoming a photographer. My father was a photographer. My brother was a photographer. He's actually my half brother, and his father was a photographer. So I don't know whether my mother was into chemicals or something, but I didn't want to be a shooter. And I don't even know, how it continued to go, but I got 8 or 9 books and a couple of novels, and the Olympic Games is one of the principal chief photographers. And it all started at Motorsport. It all started with auto racing. It started with cars.
Was there a place when you were traveling around the world and photographing Gilles in Formula One, was there a specific place that you really enjoyed going to as a photographer?
Well, every photographer that I know has a dream to shoot at Monte Carlo.
Sure.
Monte Carlo is actually a pretty simple place to shoot, because there are times they're not going that fast. You can get compression and you can have fun. That's a great one. It's a great place to shoot. It's lots of fun. Silverstone is probably the worst, because it's flat as piss on a plate, and it's just boring. For a shooter of any caliber, it's very difficult to shoot there, to get anything. The green hell, tough place to be, because one, it's an awful long way around, but there are iconic locations to shoot there. It's great, but there are all kinds of places. But going over to Europe as a Canadian and one that's nuts about cars, if you got lucky and you ended up getting a ride to the track with Gilles, because nobody else would get in the car with him. My wife, when we were over there, we were heading to Maranello from Monte Carlo, and when you're north of Genoa, the road suddenly gets elevated. That's where they had the big accident a couple of years ago, and all the bridge work fell down and killed a whole pile of people. But and it's like this, it's windy as hell. And my wife just turned to me and she said, "Were you ever nervous when you were, riding with Gilles in the car?" And I didn't drop a beat. I just said, "No, I was too busy. My life was going, past my eyes for me to get nervous." and that was basically it. And I guess that leads me into a story when they were shooting a Midas muffler commercial. I don't know whether you've heard this story or not before, but the Midas muffler commercial at CFTO in Scarborough. And I phoned Len.
Yes.
I phoned Len Coates, and Len Coates, dear God love him, he's been gone quite a few years. And I had already got into an undertaking because I had gone to Gilles and I said, I want to do a book on Grand Prix racing that we can, I never thought about what the book became because I didn't expect that we would ever lose him. I mean, he just looked like he was immortal. The accident they killed him. I saw 4 different ones, almost exactly the same. From the one in Long Beach with Clay Regazzoni, the one with Peterson in Japan, the one with Gasoline in Shubenacadie, and then of course Zolder. And they were identical, almost identical. Late breaker, the one that he broke his leg in turn 3, same thing. Late breaker, the guy in front of him gets on the binders a little earlier, and Gilles runs into the arse end of him, and it's always wheel to wheel that causes the problem. But I phoned Len and I said, "Look, Gilles and Gaston are up at CFTO. Do you want to come up?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, good, because I don't have a car." He said, "Well, I got a test vehicle from Dodge." So Len picks me up at home when I was living in Scarborough area, and up we go. And we get never any problems. A friend of mine, Wayne Sear, was there as the cameraman, and we had no problems getting in there while they did the commercial. I took a couple of pictures that were really, they were all right. But Gaston came to me and he said, we didn't bring a car up here. Rather than call, have you got a car that will take the 4 of us back to the hotel? And I said, "Yeah, sure. Let me talk to Len." So I went to Len and I said, "Gaston wants to know if we can drive them back to the hotel." And Gaston said, "Whatever you do, don't let them have the keys." So I said to Len, they want to ride back to the hotel. He said, "Well, I already gave Gilles the keys. We're taking them." And I thought, "Oh shit, Gaston there's something prophetic here. Something weird and wonderful is going to happen." And fortunately, it wasn't raining, but I don't think it would have made any difference. But I think the rubber bands that it had for 4 skins on the bottom of this car, we're going to suffer terribly at the hands of this wild man from Berthierville. But we got in the car and I got in behind him, and Gaston was on the right-hand side behind Len in the passenger seat. And the kid was in the driver's seat, and of course the car is already in gear, and we're out of the parking lot, burning rubber all the way out of the parking lot. And then he sort of seemed to calm down, gets on the public roads, and we get off, and I'm not sure there was Kennedy Road. Anyways, it's up in Scarborough. He gets off, egress onto the 401, and everything. I think, oh, this isn't so bad, because I know he was going fast and there was nobody around us, and that was about to change. But he suddenly he suddenly just seemed to be so much calmer, right? Except that when I looked at over his shoulder and I looked at the speedometer, and the speedometer is reading 110, and I'm thinking, son of a, it doesn't feel like it's that fast. But then again, maybe I guess my life was passing before my eyes again. So we get down to the Don Valley Parkway, and he gets over, and you got to swing left at that point, and where the road drops a little bit, and then it starts to rise just a touch as it, I think the turn actually tightens up a little bit. But when we get down into that hollow that goes underneath the eastbound lanes, there's a car in front of him, and he takes him on the inside against the guardrail. There's enough room to get the car between the guardrail and the car that's offending, and off we go down the Don Valley Parkway, going like through a goose, and the highway, the traffic is light until we get to about Lawrence, and then it starts to heavy up, and then it gets so heavy that he can't do this anymore, and he gets on the shoulder of the road, and then he gets onto the grass, and then he gets back on the shoulder, and we're down there going like hell until we hit Don Mills, and then he's got to slow down quite a bit because there's no way that he's going to squeeze between the ramp that comes down and dumps more cars onto the parkway. So he slides over there, and once he's free, he is up the goddamn road like Jack the Bear. And because I guess it had gotten quite congested at that point, it freed up. And now he's suddenly going like hell again. He's the kind of guy that when you're driving down the street, you want to pick up a howitzer and blow the ass end right off the car that he's driving. But that's the way it was. He was doing this all the way down there. And then we go down, and then we get to the Bloor Viaduct, the exit. And that particular piece of road, one lane goes off, and it goes down, and it's slightly off camber. It goes slightly off camber as it makes a right-hand turn, and then goes a straight shot for maybe 500 yards before it hangs on a serious left-hand turn up the hill to Bloor. Well, as we're going into this hole, as we're going into that turn before the right-hand turn, before right after getting off the Don Valley Parkway, I'm looking over his shoulders, and now all of a sudden my eyes are getting narrower and narrower and narrower until I can't see anything because I'm scared shitless. And I can see before all this happened, I could see Coates' hands on both sides of the dash, and they're now white because there's no blood getting to the hands. And Gaston's just got his head down. He's not praying. He's just knowing that, and as it goes through the turn, I'm thinking, there's no way he's going to make this. It's just going. I know I wasn't thinking. I couldn't think. I was just watching everything unfold in front of us. And I'm sure in his mind, it was going slow. It wasn't going slow. You could see the turn coming at you and coming at you and coming at you. And there's no curb there. There might be one now, but there wasn't at that time. And there was only that big bank where the overhead went to the other lane to take you northbound on the parkway. So once we get on Bloor, and we're going along Bloor, and you come to Jarvis, and he hangs a left on Jarvis, and down Jarvis he goes. And he doesn't know Toronto very well. We're trying to get to the Chelsea Inn, which is south of Carlton.
Like Bay and Gerard, isn't it?
Bay and Gerard, somewhere in that neighborhood. Anyways, he makes the right hand down Gerard. He makes the right hand turn and goes down, and he misses the Yonge Street turn, right? So because I think he just, he got going too fast and had to go around somebody and was not able to cut across the front to get down Yonge, because the hotel was one block south towards the lake. So he gets to Bay Street, hangs a left against a left-hand turn, hangs left, and then turns up the street that the Chelsea Inn is on, which is close to the intersection of right at Yonge Street. It was a T-bone. So we come down there and we're going along, and he's still going like stink. And Gaston says, there's a parking spot right over there. And of course I thought he was going to pull in front of the hotel, give us the keys and bugger off, but he didn't. He went over there and he headed straight towards that gap between a half-ton pickup and some other big beast of an automobile in front of it. And there was a gap which I hardly thought you could put a shoe in it. And he heads straight at it, gets so close, I'm thinking, there's no way. And all of a sudden the handbrake comes on, the car spins like this, and it slides in between the truck and the car in front. And I'm thinking, son of a. And then I can't. And he just says, ta-da! Throws the keys to Len, who's sitting there, busy trying to change his. He's so clinging to that he didn't have enough. He wouldn't have enough left in him to change his underwear. But, Jill gets out, and all I see is his little ass bouncing across the street and into the front of the hotel, and he's gone. And I turn around to Gaston, and Gaston turns around and he looks at me, and he's got this look in his eye. And I don't know whether or not he was ready to go to church or something like that. But anyway, Gaston said, welcome. And I thought, am I going to put up with more over the years? Which I did. But I get out of the car on the street side, and I go around, and Gaston is trying to, take him. Gaston was a little short guy. He looked like Edward G. Robinson, and about the same size, good-looking young man. Well, not young. He was old at that time. We were all old at that time. He got out, and Coates took a bit of time to get out of the car. Coates has got so much adrenaline going through him that he can't. I guess he couldn't get his hands off the dash. But he finally got out, and poor Len just shook his. Yeah, poor Len. The book that we were going to do was basically Len going to ghost write for Gilles. The text of go with my pictures on a year in Formula One or whatever, and it was part of another deal that I had with Clark Irwin. I had done a book on Greg Athens, the freestyle world champion. I'd done a book with him and talked Clark Irwin into giving me the rights to do a book called Podborski and the Downhill Experience, and one on Gilles, ghosted by Len Coates. Contracts, money already changing hands, which was great. So that afforded us a chance to go. Len was also already working with the Star. He was following Gilles quite a bit, and quite a bit. And when Gilles was finally met his demise, Len was going through a divorce. And he was up in the Bruce Peninsula somewhere trying to put his marriage back together. And he was so emotionally distraught that he could not. He couldn't write a word. He couldn't write a single word to put the original 1982 version of Villeneuve together. Jackie Stewart had got in touch with Gaston, and he said, "You've got to do a book for the fans. You need to do something." So Gaston got to me, and Jackie and Jody decided one of them had to, I think they flipped. One was going to write the foreword, and Jackie wrote the afterword to the book, which sold 78,000 copies at $20 a pop. This is a lot of money. And it's amazing at that time, the number of people that had no idea who he was. I mean, Canadians, a big publisher in the in Canada, Trick Carré, took on the French version, and General Publishing were going to take on the English. And at a meeting that they had when they were doing their spring list or fall list for Christmas, it was decided by the chairman of the board, who had just come over from Atlantic Records, that they were going to let Villeneuve die with Villeneuve. Well, I had been having a sordid affair with the secretary for his secretary, this new boss. She got on the phone and called me right away. She said, "They're going to let Villeneuve die with Villeneuve." And I said, "What the hell does that mean?" And she said, "Well, they're going to put him on a remainder shelf at $5 a pop right off the bat. They're not even going to sell it as retail." And I said, "Bull." So I called the French publisher and I said, "I know that the plan is to let Villeneuve die with Villeneuve." It was virtually the same statement that had been made by the CEO. And he said, "Where did you hear that?" And I said, "It makes no difference." I said, "If that ever happens, I will have every media in the sports world all over that company, and they will make sure that everybody knows how they're treating our iconic man, our iconic Gilles." So I said I need a skid of books at the end of November. I arranged for a friend of mine, Paul King, to use his bookstore to launch the Villeneuve book in 1982 in the end of November. And I made a small card with a wallet-sized picture of Villeneuve, the eyes, not the eyes, but the head-on shot. And I handed them around the bar, and I said, if you've got any friends, you want to invite them to the launch, invite them along. I sold over 900 books that night, on a night that it was so cold and so freezing. There was ice everywhere. And there was a lineup all the way around the block to get into this bookstore. And I phoned a friend of mine that ran the Holiday Inn next door. And I said, look, I got Raj, I got all these people here and they're freezing their asses off. Can you open up the ballroom for me? He says, yeah, can I sell booze and food? I said, we'll buy the food. They want to buy booze, they can buy their own booze. So we moved the whole shebang, all these books and everything over. And I have a tendency when I have a book fair or sign books, I spend time with each person that has taken and has to give them the respect that they deserve, to understand that they care about what they're buying. And they care about you, and they care about Gilles, and I find that it's more important to spend an extra 2 or 3 minutes with them as opposed to the way you see some of the lineups. They hand them out like chicken feed, and the guy doesn't have anything, no memory. They have no memory of you, the person that they idolize, that they've taken your autograph or whatever. I get people, even now, as old and as changed as I am, I can walk down the street in Montreal and I'll get some guy that'll stop me and talk to me like he's an old friend. Yeah. And he's bought my buddy book in 1982. So there's two old farts standing there talking on the street, laughing.
Yeah, I don't think Canadians in general have any idea, any full appreciation of the level of admiration that Gilles continues to have in Europe and in the Formula One community is just it's incredible. We were in Lake Como, as I said, between pre-qualifying Le Mans, and we're in a little shop buying water or whatever, wandering around, and there's a racing magazine, and there's Gilles on the cover, and this is 2007, 2008. Yeah, just incredible.
What happened when you went to Monza?
Yeah, that was once again just, and that was 2011, and still selling Gilles merchandise from my recollection, and then going to we did a tour of Fiorano. We saw the bust near the test track. Yeah, just unreal. Just unreal.
Dad, I remember we got into a cab maybe in Rome, one of those trips when we were in between Le Mans and pre-qual, and the cab driver didn't speak English, but kind of figured out we were Canadian. And when he figured that out, the first thing he said was Gilles Villeneuve. And we were all like, that's so crazy. Like,
yeah, it is.
The impact that he had.
My wife and my wife had never been to Europe, and I wanted to go over and just see the look on her face when she saw Paris and Venice and stuff. And we were at that time on Facebook, and we let everybody know that where we were going and what was going on. And we got lots of people that said, you got to come and visit, you got to do this, you got to do that. And when we got to Rome, things got heated. One guy just said, I'm coming over to your hotel and I'll be there in an hour. And I thought, Jesus, so we get out, and driving a Lambretta down the sidewalk is this guy that's got a Villeneuve replica helmet on. And of course he had a whole pile of memorabilia that he wanted signed. and Massimo's his name, a great guy, just a great guy. And then at the same time, during the first same couple of days, we got a message from a guy by the name of Gabe, who was up in Lugano, just south of Lake Como. And he said, you got to stop and come and see what I have. So we drive down this alleyway, and it's, like it's not a seedy part of town. There are no seedy parts of town. But we see this big thing that's like a barn, and a big husky guy, jovial as hell. And my wife said to me, she said, do you know who this guy is? And I said, no, I've never met him before. He said, what the hell are you doing? And I said, well, what's he going to do? Shoot us? Take us hostage? For the Canadian government doesn't give a goddamn about us anyway, so they're not going to get any money out of them. So we went in there, and when we walked into this room, I saw the biggest slot track that I have seen in years. And it was this whole room that would have been, as big as one of the foyers at the track, just huge. And all the walls were festooned with Villeneuve memorabilia or posters or stuff that was so rare that I just, his name was Gabe, another one of those Italian names that's totally indescribable or unmentionable. But, and she was sitting there, and he brought out champagne and all kinds of stuff. And my wife said, I don't understand what it is about Gilles. She said, well, it's all about what he gave us. And we don't want to let it die. There's no way. No. And he pointed to me, he says, your husband's my hero. He says, he actually was there. He talked to him. He actually had an opportunity to be part of his life. And I just looked at Angela and I said, one of my real jobs is to make sure that he continues, the legacy continues on. And I love it. I love every day I get on the average, probably 20 to 25, either emails or messages, or I'll put up a picture that nobody's ever seen before. And that has to do with Villeneuve or Formula One or something like that. And I realized that there are an awful lot of people out there that still love this guy, as crazy as he was, because he's not, he was special in a lot of ways, but he was one of the most self-centered sons of that I had ever met. But you are never going to get ahead in any kind of sport or any kind of anything else if you don't have this inner passion. You have to have that passion. And that's what makes you different,
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for telling all the stories. And I know the way you share them and you continue to tell them. And I remember the first night I met you in 2013 at the truck race at CTMP. It's a night I'll remember forever. And in Gary Grant's RV, and you just regaled me with all the stories and tales, and it was mind-blowing moment for me. But and shooting in 2017 when you came back to shoot the Formula One Masters revival, and there was one of Gilles' cars from '79, I believe, was there. Yeah. So did that kind of bring it full circle for you, when that experience a bit?
Well, I through one of your postings, and I don't know whether you know how well your postings reach out to people, but I get them all the time, and they're important to me to see them. And I saw that the T4 was going to be there, and driven by Danny Baker from California. And I just said to Angela, I said, that Gilles' car that he won at Long Beach is going to be at Motorsport. And I just said, I'd love to hear that song again. And she said, well, let's go. And here we live in Vancouver. I mean, it's not as though we can just pick up the car and drive over. And so we made a point of going and being there. And when we got, of course, hear the car and see the car. And she had never heard of Formula One Ferrari before. And I mean, I got her in earplugs and everything else because that's the surest way to screw your ears up. Fortunately, I was able to get Westinghouse to give me a set of earplugs, which protected my ears. And I don't have any problems at this age, 76. I don't have any problems in my ears to this day. But when we applied for credentials, I asked if some kind of access would be given to Angela, and they gave her, you guys gave her, whoever did, gave her identical credentials as what I was carrying, and I would never ever put her in a position where she would be in danger of any kind. She's the best thing that happened in my whole life. I'm not going to have some goddamn guy throwing a car at 175 miles an hour, taking that part of my life away from me. But she shot some beautiful stuff, but she has now gotten into photography, which is kind of fun. And, she just encourages me to do all kinds of stuff. I mean, that I normally didn't do, but when we went back there, we were treated with such great respect. And we saw so many of the old guys and the legends and Luddy and Bev Hugenholtz and Hugh Scully, and it's just great to see people and be appreciated and realize that, hey, wait a second, that kid that comes up and just stands there and doesn't know what to say to you. He sees somebody that's important to him. As in the press room in 2013, when you walked up to me and didn't have enough balls to say, hey, and they had to go to Gary Grant to ask permission. Yeah. But anyways, but something, it's the kind of thing that your dad is the same. I think you're very similar to me. I can't tell the difference between the Pope and the guy that's standing on the corner. They're all the same, and you treat them the same. You don't just piss all over some guy because you don't like the color of his teeth, or some other problem. And I'm firmly invested in producing an album on the homeless problem that we have in this world, and the fact that our governments are so blind, and they lie to us, they bullshit us and say, oh, we've got all this happening, and years go by. I'll tell you, in at one time when I worked in Sault Ste. Marie, I lost my job in January because my publisher, the editor, took me and he says, I can't invest any more time in you because you can't spell. You can write great stories, you take great pictures, but you can't spell, and I'm not going to be bothered spending the time with you. And I took him, I just closed this door and I said, you see that sign right there? It says Chester Grant, editor-in-chief. I said, that's your job. You edit my mistakes. You do it. He said, you're out of here. And I was gone. But you know what? I was gone. I was on the street. And I spent January, February, March literally living on the street. and I'm talking about, if you want to be in an interesting situation, walk around outside at 25 or 30 below zero in the snow and the ice in Sault Ste. Marie, and I'll guarantee you will understand what kind of crap is going on with our poor homeless people. They're not there because they like it. They're there because of circumstance. And mine was, I was there because of a circumstance. I couldn't spell. Thank God there's spell check. But
yeah.
I mean, there's an interesting time. I mean, I found a way to get into a church on Queen Street, and by pulling both doors, the lock would pull forward and separate the doors, and I would go in there, pull them back to look like it's locked, and I climbed up into the steeple and I slept in the steeple for every night that I could get in there. And then I guess the priest realized that I was in there, so that at 7:30 Mass every day, at 7:30 Mass, those goddamn bells would go off about 10 feet from my head. Have you ever been 10 feet away from, make the Formula One car look like a joke? I'll tell you. But you know something, he knew it, but he never threw me out. I spent hours and hours and hours reading books. That's where I began to really enjoy reading in the library, just to stay inside and stay warm. And I fortunately had friends of mine that would, chopped egg sandwiches were the best at that point in time. So it's all about circumstance, and life is about circumstance. I mean, if I didn't meet Harvey Hudis, I probably would never have been, well, I probably would have been where I am, but it would have been a different circumstance. And some of the color, blue and others, would probably not be part of the texture of my life. And I may not have met Gilles. I may not have met, the great first aid crew that's at Turn 10. I mean, that's a great gang, and they are so. They're like firefighters, like everything is black humor and lots of fun until that bell goes off, or they drag some poor guy in on the end of a hook. You don't realize that they all are great and they do a hell of a job.
So do. The sport could not survive without volunteers.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, some of the stuff that happens and how the layman gets in all kinds of trouble down at the loop at which I'm sure that at Watkins Glen. Years ago, there was no guardrail on the outside of that. There was just an earth berm.
Wow.
Right? And this is about 1969, I think, or 70. And I was on the top of that berm, but down low and shooting very, very low. And during the Formula One race, I don't even know there was a race. It might have been qualifying. But Eamon came around in a Ferrari, got off the pavement and got through the gravel. And all of a sudden there's flying in all directions, and I just ducked right down. And then I realized to my left there was a Joe Public that had snuck up, along the edge, and also had his head up, but rather than drop down, he had turned around and he jumped. Well, he jumped about 8 or 10 feet into a full bramble patch. There were lots of those volunteers that went in there, and it took them about an hour and a half to cut him out of there. And he was in really bad shape. But that's what it is. Volunteers, they go beyond, they go beyond.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, this has been awesome.
It's been great
thank
fun.
You so much.
Yeah. Yes.
It's great fun. I'm just looking at my picture here on the right, and I'm thinking, my face is all flushed. I look like Santa Claus. Oh, well, maybe I'll get a job at the mall next year. Anyways, I enjoyed this immensely, and I find
indeed.
I've found it's a great honor to be even considered to come along and spread more lies.
Great stories, Allan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and you're welcome at CTMP anytime.
Yes.
Now I thank you again. We'll be back for sure. Definitely.
Okay, good.
Count on it. We're counting on it.
Good. Thank you again. Bye now.
Cheers.
All right, take care, Allan. Bye-bye.